These are the three main risks in all of DeFi. And the first one is that the actual technology itself, that smart contract, once you deposit your money, if something happened with that smart contract where there was an exploit in the code, which has happened lots of times, billions of dollars have been lost in DeFi because of code exploits in smart contracts, your money's pretty much gone. This is one of the biggest risks in DeFi, especially if you're using some of these newer protocols or unproven technology, unaudited technology, especially if you ever see something with beta, that's a red flag. You don't want to be trying a beta. The other one that's a little bit more complicated, and what I was trying to tell you on Uniswap is this idea of impermanent loss, which really just means that there's a divergence in the price of the asset in the liquidity pool versus what you could get on the exchange somewhere else, because there's no order book, and because there is sort of the price within these liquidity pools is based on how much liquidity there is. That there may be times in the liquidity pool where if you were to pull out your money, you'd be getting less for the tokens that you'd have than if you were buying or selling on a different exchange. If you're pooling for more volatile assets that can move one way or the other against each other pretty fast, you have more risk here. So I would suggest using stable coins when you're, or at least, one pair that is a stable coin when you're pooling liquidity to sort of mitigate this a bit, because that means that you're taking one side of the equation off, whereas the other side is, then you only have one token moving up and down. Because it's really impossible to tell when the market or when certain coins are going to be stable. You're just going to want to try to mitigate it from picking less volatile coins, which usually when you see a giant APY, a giant yield on some liquidity pool or yield farming type product, it's because there's a lot more risk, and those are usually a lot more prone to impermanent loss.
David, the size of the pool, that's a factor too, right? I mean, the bigger the size of a pool, probably the less risky.
Yeah,
right?
which corresponds also to the APY, which is why in our first example, when I was showing you guys the Ethereum pool that had pretty low APY because it had tons of liquidity. And so there's just less risk. If there was two tokens in there and they both had a lot of liquidity on each side, then one moving, one drying up in liquidity faster is not going to be as prevalent.
Some of us got really interested in Aave because we're seeing those 8 to 10% rates, and we thought, well, we can invest with stable coins. As you said, you remove one side of the risk. Like if you're just straight lending on Aave, what's the other risk if you're using a stable coin?
That whole model is pretty safe. The only risk you have there is, well, if the smart contract, there's an exploit. In most cases, it may make sense to just go and lend it that way versus put it into a pool with another token. You might get more trading fees if you put it into a pool. But I would recommend that you probably just take the path of least resistance there, the easiest one to understand, which is just to go and lend it solo, right? I don't even pool liquidity myself, unless the only time I do is if there's a really good liquidity mining program where they're offering you extra incentives, those extra LP tokens on top of it. Like for example, Uniswap used to also give you Uni, their native governance token, whenever you pooled assets into stuff. That dried up, and they're going to do another program. So right now people are only getting trading fees. But if there's enough of an incentive to make some of those other risks worth it, then, and you believe in whatever the LP token is, then that might be more worth it for you to pool liquidity versus a different option. So finally, really just starting small, because as you can tell, there's a lot of complicated aspects to this. The best way you're going to learn it is just kind of diving head deep and making some mistakes. Better to make small mistakes. Really invest in what you understand, at least from a foundational basic level, which hopefully this course helped you do. And then also sticking with established DeFi apps and products. So less of things that haven't been around too long. I mean, nothing's been around in that long in the space, but Yearn.finance, for example, is one that's been around since the beginning, and others. Aave's also, kind of a blue chip one. Some of these other random ones that come about that or may not even be audited, and may still be in beta. And then also just kind of using those less exotic, less pairs, not going into those ones that are like 5 different LP tokens that you've never heard of that promise super high yield. When you're pooling liquidity, the more volatile the assets are, the more you are at risk for impermanent loss. And that if you use DeFi on Ethereum, you're going to pay very high fees. So better to, you might want to look at other options as well. Be very wary of products that offer high yield, even 20% or more.
But what's your thinking on that, David? I mean, where does DeFi go? I mean, it's like, obviously it's very centric, but how about the other chains like Polkadot? Of course, there's Binance Chain and Avalanche, Solana.
The liquidity will move to the best chain. I've seen a lot of liquidity move from Ethereum to these other chains. Solana, for example, but I think Binance Smart Chain is probably the biggest one. Really, it's all the same types of products. It's just built on a different infrastructure. The different chain is essentially allow you to do it faster and cheaper.
Liquidity pools or some staking protocols that I entered into, but I didn't read the terms and agreement. And I really suggest everybody reads that because, there's this one project where I'm locked in for 30 days. And, during that time of 30 days, May 19th happened and I watched money plummet, but I couldn't withdraw from that due to the terms and agreement. So definitely when you guys participate, just make sure you guys read and educate yourselves on what you're participating in. That was awesome, David. Honestly, thank you for presenting this. And
take it easy, everyone. Nice to be here.